Under Trump's new bill, ICE is set to become the highest funded law enforcement agency in the federal government. The administration is set to pour $178 billion into immigration enforcement over the next decade, including $75 billion in extra funding for ICE. It is the largest infusion of funds Congress has given the federal government for immigration enforcement. And right now, ICE's budget is already over $37 billion. With this increase, it'll soon be bigger than most militaries around the world. With us now, New York Congressman and Congressional Hispanic Caucus Chair, Congressman Adriano Espaillat. Congressman, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me again.
Last time you were on the show, I asked you if ICE should be abolished. You said ICE should be reformed. And I want to keep coming back to this because I think the more we see of ICE, the more we see of its egregious behavior, the impunity that it's operating with, the fact that it is becoming an almost standalone military.
It's a runaway train.
It's a runaway train. And do you still believe it can be reformed? I mean, you have introduced legislation in the past about abolishing ICE, and I'm curious to know why you changed.
You know, the New York City Police Department doesn't use a mask. In fact, they have cameras, body cameras.
And the names of officers names, right? And the badge numbers.
All law enforcement should do that. In fact, the body cameras work also somewhat in their favor. You know, you could use some of the film footage to prosecute the bad guys. You can't have a false accusation against you because it's all on film. And so why should ICE agents be anonymous?
Yeah.
Particularly in a time where we just had a tragic situation in Minnesota where somebody impersonated a police officer, went in, shot and killed an elected official and her husband.
And to that point, there have been cases where people have been unsure if the federal agents who have arrived are actually federal agents. I mean, they simply will not answer questions at times. As you just mentioned, they're not showing their faces. They're not wearing their names on their
They may not show badges or warrants.
That's right. I'm curious, you know, right now so much of the attention and sort of federal performance and theater of all of this is focused on California. But everyone knows it's going to come to New York sometime soon. How are you preparing for that reality, that at some point the National Guard might come here, that there will be National Guard, ICE, maybe Marines in New York at some point? How are you going to protect your constituents and the family members that they have who may be directly impacted by all this?
First, we educate them and we tell them what their rights are, right? For example, we did that when the raids were spilled over the neighborhood and people were very afraid, although they weren't really occurring. We told them you don't have to open the door to an ICE agent unless they have a legitimate warrant from a judge with your name on it. And so we have to educate first. Then accountability. I think we're going to continue to put the pressure for ICE to be accountable and for us to have access to these detention centers. For example, 26 Federal Plaza is an administrative building. It's not a detention center like the one in Elizabeth, New Jersey. But yet they're holding people there for extended periods of time. Do they have the capacity to do that? Do they meet codes to do that? Are they violating people's rights when they're doing that? Who are they holding there? 60,000 people are being detained by ICE right now, 75% of which haven't committed a crime. These are workers. I met with them in detention centers, men and women, people that were going to work, people that have families that have been ripped apart from their families, and now are awaiting deportation. So this is a bad time for America where innocent people that have not committed a violent crime, are now facing major deportation. Their families are going to be split. And guess what? They're going to be a load on government because we're going to have to take care of them.
New Gallup polling shows right now record high support for immigration in the U.S. It seems like the tide is turning, that as people see these images, they maybe are starting to feel this is not what they voted for. This is not what they imagined would transpire. And I'm curious how you think Democrats can strategize around their messaging and their storytelling around what immigration means to the United States. I think about what we're hearing from some of your colleagues coming out of Alligator Alcatraz, for example, and the sights and smells and sounds that they experienced today. How you're going to transport that and no longer as Democrats be on your back foot defending the idea of immigration, but actually driving the story of what what this is supposed to be.
Those are very graphic, and you could almost smell them, right, when they tell you. But the kids, what's happening to the kids, that will impact anybody, a Republican mom, a Democratic mom, an independent mom, a father. Anybody will be moved dramatically by the stories of what's happening to the kids.
But why aren't, to Antonia's point, why can't Democrats capitalize on this? And capitalize sounds so callous and calculating, but what I mean is it does seem like we're at a tipping point. That if you look at the polling that Antonia mentioned, showing that Americans are more pro-immigration than they ever have been in all of Gallup's polling going back however many decades, the big change is among Republicans. Democrats have been pro-immigration for a while. Republicans are now becoming much more pro-immigration. And now it still feels like Democrats, to use Antonia's term, are on their back foot, that they are nervous about talking about this, about making what they think is a vulnerability a strength.
It is Democrats that are showing up to the detention centers. It is Democrats that are saying, dreamers, farm workers, and keeping families together. It is Democrats that are going to court challenging these things.
It's also some Democrats voted for the Laken Riley Act.
You know, that is true, but it is Democrats that are, and I think that we're pushing, and as a result of that push, yes, there's a change of opinion. Much more needs to be done, absolutely. You know, we really need to get into that 10th floor of 26 Federal Plaza and know what's going on there. I mean, it's not just the detention centers, the traditional ones. This is places where people are meeting their pre-scheduled appointments. They're complying with the law, for God's sake. The judges dismissed the cases, and ICE is outside stalking them to arrest them, cuff them, arrest them, and deport them as they comply with the law. The ITIN number, there's a lawsuit on that. People that were asked, pay your taxes. If you're here undocumented and you're working, pay your taxes. They have. They use an ITIN. Now they want to release that information so that ICE could have their first name, last names, and where they live and work. And so this is a police state on steroids, fully funded, as you said earlier, and we must hold them accountable every inch of the way. And we're fighting back.
I got to ask you quickly before we go to break. You recently endorsed Zohran Mamdani here in New York for mayor. And, you know, on this issue, he speaks very forcefully. He had a conversation with you, Eamon, about how he still thinks that they should abolish ICE. And so I'm curious where you see, like, what brought you into the fold with him? What's made you excited to partner with him?
Of course.
And kind of, I guess, where you see New York going now. If he is becoming kind of the new energy here in the city, are there lessons you're going to learn from the way he ran his campaign and the people he's talking to?
Well, we're both immigrants, obviously. We both have tough names to pronounce, I may add.
I know that as well.
And so we have that similarity. I think that affordability in my district is something that I've been fighting for all my life, people getting pushed out the neighborhood. And New York is at a tipping point. It's at the precipice in terms of affordability. We'll have our differences on other issues. And the immigration issue, I say restructure, reform the police. He says abolish. You know, if you really look at it, a reform could be very, very extensive and reshape the makeup of a police force, or in this case, ICE. Body cameras, no mask. Those things, I think, are very important when you're law enforcement. Law enforcement should be as transparent as possible to ensure that people trust them. And trust between the community and law enforcement is very important.
Thank you, Congressman. It's great to have you back.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
See you.